Well, since he started his broadcast that way, that way too, my name is Dora and I used to work with Hutchin. And I was born October 12th, 1937 in Endicott at Ideal Hospital. My grandfather, well, I wasn't born there because my grandfather worked there, but he did work there as a custodian. And they used this new anesthesia on my mother, knew at the time it was called twilight sleep, and they gave her too much. And all of a sudden my grandfather was on the elevator and they hear them, paging my mother's doctor. And so she almost died. She was in the hospital 2 weeks and came home by ambulance just because of this overdose. So anyway, we lived in a little house behind the little house. Aunt Gladys and Uncle Ted had a little house out in front on the street with a little steep roof, 3-room apartment above it. And then behind them was a 2-car garage, and in the back of the garage was this 4-room apartment. And that's where we lived. I'm not sure that that's where they lived when I was born or not, but that's where I remember living first. And we lived there until 1947. On July 4th, we were sleeping. It was the middle of the night. And my mom and dad's bedroom was close to the garage. And they smelled smoke. They smelled smoke, and in fact, the garage was on fire. And so my mother, instead of coming and waking us up and getting us out of the house, my sister and I both woke up simultaneously, I guess, to hear my mom on the phone with the fire department, calling the fire department that her house is on fire.
You had a phone?
Thank God. Anyway, hopefully today everybody knows first you get everybody out of the house. So we all, got out, but everything we owned was smoke damaged or water damaged, and the car we had was ruined, and my dad didn't leave insurance. So anyway, at that point there was a commercial type building being built 2 houses up towards Main Street on Oakdale Road, and the bottom was to be commercial, and the second floor was to be 2 4-room apartments. So we lived in that house. They had this gigantic tarp on the roof because the roof had blown off when the gas tanks exploded in the cars that were in the garage. We lived there with that tarp on the roof to be our roof. I don't know how many months. And when the apartment got done over the building 2 houses up, that's where we moved. And so we lived there from when I was in 5th grade until after Al and I got married when I was 19. 9 years I lived there. During that time, my sister got married. My dad got real sick. Fell and broke his hip at work. And while he was being hospitalized for that, he got the DTs. He was an alcoholic. And in his ranting and raving, from that, he got his voice hoarse, and it never went back to normal. So his hip doctors kept saying, you need to go, get this throat checked. But my dad didn't believe in doctors' insurance or anything like that. Finally, the hip doctor made the appointment with the throat doctor, and he went to him in May 1954, and they sent him up to Roswell, and he had 3 surgeries, the largest one of which they removed his voice box. So he no longer spoke.
He had cancer, right?
Oh yeah. And he came home in, I think it was July, and he was supposed to go back in September for a checkup, and he told my mom he wasn't going because he knew that he was not gonna make it and he wasn't going back up there and having them cut more of him away. And I thought he was just being stubborn as usual, and at 16 I just didn't have a lot of compassion at that point toward him. So anyway, that was September, and he died November 29th of that year, which was my senior year in high school. And by then I had turned 17 by then. So anyway, my mom and I lived in that apartment, and then she was out at work when he came home from the service, and he was in school. So we lived with her for about 3 months because I was the only one that was working. And, I didn't want to move out and leave her with no income. She was going to, which was really brave of her back then. She was in her early 40s, and she was going to Ridley's business school to learn how to type so she could get a better job than she had been having, just working in a store, a ladies' dress shop. So anyway, that's that part of my life. But prior to that, do you want to hear family history?
No, but interesting stories.
Well, my father's last name was Forwood. His father's name was Horton, and Horton married a young woman named Nora Brunges. And every year we had Brunges and schoonover reunions in Pennsylvania. Both my parents and their families were all born and raised in Pennsylvania. So anyway, one year at the Brunges reunion, after you were born, Michelle was born even, this man came, Brunges, from Chicago, and he had traced back the family tree. And it seems there were 2 brothers named Brunges who were from someplace in Germany, and they had come over on a cattle ship because they couldn't afford to come and live with a passenger ship. And when they got to New York, where they landed, the one brother headed up to Connecticut, and our branch of the Brungeses, he headed down to Pennsylvania and worked on a farm, and he was really smart because he married the farmer's daughter and ended up getting the farm. That was how that branch of the Brunges family started for us. My mother's family, her father's name was Bennett Ferry. I don't know when the Ferries came here, but they all lived in Pennsylvania. And then he married my mom's mother, my grandma, and her name was Myrtle Schoonover. And this year's the 97th Schoonover reunion. But it was interesting. My grandma Ferry's parents were quite well-to-do for the time, and they owned a lake, and the lake had a waterfall down into a smaller lake, which then fell into a creek. And my great-grandfather had a very profitable mill that was powered by the creek. And someone did research on him and read it at the reunion 5 years ago, and he had a lot of newspaper clippings regarding the mill. And my great-grandfather was in politics, and he was considered very successful, and people would come from all over because he ground the flour so especially. Anyway, they had 13 children, 11 survived to live. So it's a huge, enormous family. Most of them were redheads, still are. If you go to a Schoonover reunion, they'll be mostly redheads. At some point, well, we used to go down to the lake, my great-grandmother's lake, and it was wonderful, except that, they had the outhouse, but, the first thing my sister and I did when we got out of the car was run over and begin pumping the water, out of the ground, because it was so cold and so good. But by then, they actually had running cold water in the house. And in fact, they even had a bathroom with a bathtub in the house, but it wasn't usable. We didn't have enough water it was on the second floor to make it function. Anyway, when I was a child, there were 3 cottages down near the lake, and one of them, my great-grandma, because my great-grandfather had died relatively young, my great-grandma and the one daughter who hadn't married, opened up the front of one of the cottages as a store for the fishermen who came and rented boats to go out fishing. And they sold penny candy and things like that. So that was a big treat if you were staying at great-grandma's house. We did a little walk across the road to the lake and go, buy candy from them. And they had big pretzel rounds and jars, etc. But when they didn't have that open, then they let us stay in the cottage. And we could, we would go down for a whole week. And again, the problem was the outhouse. And that's where we got our first dog, Bowser. Someone had dropped her off there, and she made herself a home underneath the overturned boats in the winter, and was fed by charitable fishermen. And we got down there and we brought her back to New York with us. And
Where was the lake?
Center Moreland, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
It was originally called Perrin's Marsh, and Perrin's Marsh was actually like a location of its own. But when my great-grandfather acquired it, they renamed it Swindler's Lake or Pond or whatever. And sadly, when my aunt got too old to stay in the house, she moved into town, and at that point they sold the lake and all the land around it, and now it's all built up with houses, and they're really sad to go back. My mom was born in 44, Pennsylvania, in a house on 4th Street, and she grew up there. She graduated from 44 High School. My dad only went through 8th grade because he was a farm boy. And there was a one-room schoolhouse up the road where it went to 8th grade, that was it. And then if you had money enough, you could go into Tunkhannock to the high school, but he didn't. And his father needed him to work on the farm. So he had an 8th grade education. And for some reason, but when my sister was 6, because they had no kindergarten in that school, we were living at that farm in Pennsylvania. I don't really know why, and there's nobody to ask now, but my sister didn't go to kindergarten. In fact, she started school in the same one-room schoolhouse where my dad went. And now it's a pretty house. Somebody has converted it into a house, and it's a really cool-looking building. Anyway, by the time I was 4 and ready to start kindergarten, we were living back in Johnson City. And I went to Westover School, and I went to see Fred for a year like he did. Then I went to high school. And I had planned to be a nurse, and in 9th grade I was taking the appropriate courses for that. And then that summer my mom said, we can't afford for you to go to nursing school, so you really better get in a business course so that we can get a job when you get out of school. Which turned out well, considering that my father had died a long time. And
Pause.